You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birthies podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
Hello, Birthies families. Welcome to your reprieve from the noise and the stress that can often accompany pregnancy, birth, and parenthood. I'm your host, Michelle Smith. On today's podcast, I am incredibly excited to have with me today Natasha Solovieff. Together, we will be discussing the ways to help decrease our stress as parents and connect more fully with our children, our partners, and ourselves. Natasha is a mom, now to a beautiful 20-something. With a BSN and a master's in education, she has 25 plus years as a maternal health clinical and public health nurse. She is the author of The Dance of Parenting, Finding Your Inner Choreographer, a book that invites you to energize and strengthen your parenting dance by using your parenting love skills. And she also writes heartfelt and intriguing science for parents blogs at omgparenting.com. Welcome, Natasha, to the Birthies podcast.
Thank you for having me, Michelle. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here. So excited. So before we dig deep into all of this, could you please share a bit about yourself and what inspired you to create the Dance of Parenting?
That's a good question. The Dance of Parenting emerged from, actually, it came directly on the heels of a professional conference I was at. And I was surrounded by all these professional women. And when they heard that I did blogging on parenting, I started hearing all of their stories about their lives as a mom. And I thought about it because it struck me that so many of their stories were how they were feeling guilty, kind of the labor of love, no pun intended, of parenting. And contrasting that a bit with my own experience, not that I didn't ever labor in my love of parenting, I also enjoyed it a lot. And I also feel like it expanded my life tremendously. So I just started thinking about it. I thought, God, I think I need to do some writing about this since I had started my world in writing through blogs. And one thing led to another. And I was just thinking about parenting and all that goes into it, the pitfalls of it, the things you can kind of fall into and get stuck in as a parent that subtract or detract us from the joy of it and from the fun of it and the delight of it and the incredible life growth that goes with it, which isn't always the easiest thing, but nonetheless. And as I was just playing around with all this in my head, it struck me how parenting it's like a dance. Parenting is a partnership. We partner with these children and we lead these children and we guide the children, and sometimes they're leading us and sometimes they're guiding us. And just the image of a dance started coming up, and hence the name, The Dance of Parenting. And then, of course, I ran around and shared with people that I was writing this book and it's called The Dance of Parenting. And so many seasoned parents really resonated with that. They would laugh and say, oh, yes, and it is a dance, isn't it? And then as my thinking evolved, it was like, okay, what does it take to keep a dance? If you're truly dancing, what does it keep to move that along and become more proficient so that when you go out and you perform, you're just into it and it's happening? And how does that parallel with parenting? And from that flowed this book, The Dance of Parenting.
I love that.
Kind of a windy explanation for it all.
Yeah, no, the background is very good and helpful because I feel like your book has a different take than some of the other parenting books. I was blessed years and years ago. One of my dearest friends, she passed away a number of years ago, but she was a parenting expert, and I learned so much from her. She would teach the skills, but she also would share what you share. And what I really try to convey as I work with parents in connecting with our own inner wisdom, our own inner voice, and learning to trust that and to really connect with and trust our children as well. It's a different take on centering ourselves as parents. And so, can you touch on that and share about that a bit more, please?
Well, I think in my own parenting experience, what you just described is what I learned. There's just so much you read about parenting. There's so many how-tos out there. There's just so much information. And just in general in life, a lot of noise. And then you add your children's life to it, and it's really noisy. So I spent time, my words would be centering myself in the context of all that so I could see or hear what it was I really needed to pay attention to. So that was the beginning of my journey with it all, is just getting out of the noise. And I'm an introvert, so I kind of have to get out of noise anyway.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And then, listening to so many parents in my life, professionally and just as friends and colleagues, when adults are allowed the opportunity to go within themselves, they come up with the solution that's needed to whatever the challenge is. And it could be something simple or something complicated. And it's not that we don't need knowledge. It's not that we don't need information. That's not the case at all. We need to understand child development. We also need to kind of customize that knowledge to our particular relationship with our child. And only we can do that. And I find that if parents don't find a way to hear themselves in all of that, then they get sunk in, am I doing this right? Am I doing enough? Am I a good parent? Am I a bad parent? Oh my God, I'm screwing this up. All those thoughts can really bring down the life of parenting. I think it's just really important for modern day parents. It's probably always been important, but for modern day parents who are bombarded with all kinds of information and all kinds of chaotic noise out there just about life, I think it's just really important that we get very proficient actually at coming to what's our way of shutting it out and hearing what we really need to hear from our children and from within ourselves.
Yes. Yes. I think
It's
that's
noise
so
reduction.
powerful. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's something that I really stress with the families that I work with because there's so much noise about how to give birth while you're pregnant and how to parent. It's really, again, you're right, looking out. There are tools, there is wisdom out there that can be so helpful, but we have to check it with our own inner guidance and what's right for our children and our families. I love that's the crux of your book. And in your book, you had this quote that said, the amount of information that an average person is exposed to in a day is the same as a person from the 15th century was exposed to in his lifetime.
I know. It's mind-boggling.
It is. It
And
is.
it's a blessing and a curse. It's how to look
Yes.
at the blessing side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. So, can you share a bit about how you teach families to do that? You have a really wonderful acronym for your technique.
It's love. I guess I'm big on not just talking theoretically about something. And there's a lot of science behind all this, with our ability to look at the nervous system response to different techniques like meditation, et cetera, out there. There's a lot of science behind what seems like everyday wisdom. So I like to pull that together and put it into practice. And the second part of my book is kind of on the practice, we can feel love, and we all approach our parenting with love. We want great things for our children. We want to be open to them, and we want to wonder about life with them. But there's so many things that can pull us out of that space. So the second part of my book, I really focus on, okay, how do we get back into that space of love? And amazingly, the acronym for how to go about that is the word love, and it's L.O.V.V.E in this book. So just to summarize that, it's really about learning what are the practices that help us listen to ourselves and listen to our children. What are the practices that help us get into what I call OM space? And I don't mean that necessarily as a 20-minute meditation. There's a lot of things we can do to get into that calm place within that are actually quite quick and fun. The V space of love has to do with voicing and visualizing. I think we start out, you mentioned being pregnant before, and I think we start out in our pregnancy, even before we become pregnant, we have great visions of our child's life, us being with our child in that life. And so the visions are there right from the get-go. And how do we work with that visioning to make it helpful to us? Because sometimes once we become a parent, it's really a little different than what we envisioned, or our delivery can be really different than what we envisioned. So vision and the voice part of it, I put in there specifically because of moms, and we moms, being so other oriented, sometimes have trouble voicing some things that are about ourselves or about our boundaries, are about just our experience. And I think it's really, really important to voice our experience. And I could go on and on about that, but I won't right now. And the last part of the love practices is E, and that's about exploring. I think parenting is a great exploration. We will meet, it is for sure that we will meet things that we weren't planning on, and they're new to us. So we have to explore about them. And that's kind of where the knowing about child development comes in, knowing about options for delivery come in, knowing about what do different people say about weight gain during pregnancy. That's that exploration part. We become mini encyclopedias in some ways. We get happy about Google.
Yes, Dr. Google. Yeah.
Also, so it's listening, and it's a circle. I think of it as a circle: listening, oming, voicing, visualizing, exploring. And when there's a challenge going on, or when you just notice yourself being a little agitated about something, you went to the doctor and you're not sure you liked how they talked about your high blood pressure, so you're just agitated. You can leap in anywhere on this circle. You can start at any point and get to all of the other ones to get to a place where you're calm and confident. Okay, this is my next step. So it's a circular system, if you will. It's not a linear one. There's no do this first, do this second, do this third, do this fourth. So when I'm working with people, it's more like listening, and I ask, what do you think would be most helpful to you? To have a little more information? Is there something you need to say to somebody? Is there something you need to acknowledge to yourself? Are you feeling so jumbled inside that you feel like you just need to calm down a bit before you can even get a perspective or start to get a perspective? Or are you hearing a little voice in your head and it's telling you something and you haven't been wanting to pay attention? Those kinds of questions. And we just start wherever that person's at and go from there.
It's really powerful because there are those voices, as you put it, in our head. And sometimes it's our inner wisdom. And then a lot of times it's voices from our own experiences of our own culture and expectations that have been passed down that worked in that time that perhaps are no longer working. And I think each generation, ideally, expands and grows and parents differently than the generation before. And so, what served our parents may not serve us now as parents. It can be difficult sometimes to defy what we've been taught or change it. I know for myself, sometimes I have moms that really want to have a natural birth, and everyone in their family is saying, no, 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 you should just get an epidural and have a cesarean. And that journey of finding your own inner strength, your own inner power to do what's right for you and your baby is a huge, huge lesson and teaching and parenting, I think.
Yes, it's the beginning of finding your voice about it all. And it's not like a switch you turn off and on. It's a process. And the only thing I can say for certain about that process is when it's coming up in you and you hear anything judgy or critical, you know that's not the voice you want to listen to. I can say that for absolute certain because our voice around all of this is the loving voice that we want to be hearing. And we get to go from there. But it's hard. That's very, very hard when you're pregnant and you're nervous about delivery and you're vulnerable. You want to do the best thing for yourself and for your child, to be going against the grain of either the subculture around you or what you thought you wanted to do yourself is just mind boggling. It's huge. I say that every time a child is born, there's this silent explosion in the world. And I think it's because, yes, this child is born. It is the most natural, everyday thing that happens in our human life. But to get to the point of birthing that child has been such a journey for every woman and for every participating father. It's just a journey, and it can kind of knock your socks off with, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know I thought this way. I didn't know I was just scared of pain. I didn't know there are all these ways to manage pain. I didn't know how controlling I am. I really want to control this process. And then we learn, guess what? Birth is a natural thing. There's so many things that we can't control. We participate in and we control our ultimate response to it. But it's such a journey getting that baby out. And I smile about it because the more a woman can acknowledge what that journey is for her and put voice to it and learn to listen to herself and her inner wisdom, her inner experience, and put words to that, the more she will grow as a woman and the more connected to her baby she'll be.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
beautiful thing. I just find the whole thing wrapped in beauty.
Yeah.
But I'm weird that way.
No, oh, I agree. I agree. I feel our children are our teachers,
Yeah.
and they are going to make us grow and stretch in ways that we did not even know was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that growth sometimes is painful, and sometimes it's just natural and organic. But I feel like in pregnancy and birth and in parenting, there's a certain amount of surrender necessary.
Yes. And that's that piece,
Mhm.
the surrender piece, or it underlies the whole idea of loving, I think. There's so much surrendering. I mean, when I think of for myself, the things I bumped into that I really, I don't know, even though I'm a clinical nurse, I just didn't know. I don't know. I didn't experience them from this side. So they were mind boggling. And so I went through my whole resistance. No, they can't be. No, I must be wrong. There's something wrong with me. I'm parenting wrong. I went through all of it. And I think everybody will have those moments. I think that's the most normal thing in the world. It's what we do with it that matters.
Yes.
I think coming around and having a process. And that's what I love about my little love thing is, I go back to my book. I mean, what do I need to pay attention to now? It's like, What part of me needs attention? What am I supposed to be looking at? Because that's your way back into your flow with it, your acceptance of it. And like you said, your surrender. You surrender to what is. And it ceases to be such a huge thing. It's just, it is. So let me deal. Let me find my way. And I'm an optimist, so I'm going to say, let's find the good stuff in it. Or let's find reality in it. And where do we need to go with the fact that I'm not dilated? If you look at delivery, geez, this isn't happening. I'm not just going from 3 centimeters to 10 centimeters the way I'm supposed to. What now? And people are telling you, do this, do that, do the other thing. And, how do you get to that place and in the heat of the moment and work with the practitioners around you and have them work with you? And that's what I like about the little love system. It gives you a place to fall back on. It's like, oh, okay, if I do this, that will help me get quiet so I can pay attention. It'll remind you, I need to voice my concerns. I need to voice my disappointment. I need to voice what I want to have happen here and how much can we work with this. And so it reminds us to do that.
So in that example,
Mm-hmm.
can you lead us through the love?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not dilating as quickly as I thought I would, or my care providers feel I should be, because there's always that should in there, right? And is this just expectations set by the medical community? Am I okay? Is there something that is stalling the labor? How could love help work through that?
Well, I think, first of all, just having the idea of love in your head is helpful, because what happens when you're not dilating, you're like, oh my God, my body's not doing it. Oh my God, I'm harming my child, my baby. I suck at this. All these things that
Right.
I'm not even a parent yet and I suck at it. And it's such an emotional time and your hormones are doing all this and your partner in labor is getting tense and practitioners are hovering around you. So I think some of how you get through that is going to back up into what you were doing when you were pregnant and getting ready for labor and who you have with you. So I think it's having a person with you where you've talked about some of these unpredictable things that come up and how you want to manage that when they happen. Because it's all about weighing variables. So hopefully there have been some discussions about that beforehand, because that will make this much easier. Well, easier is a kind of a weird word to use on it. It'll make it more
Effective?
yes, to move through it. So hopefully you've had those conversations and you have somebody with you where you've actually talked about, you've anticipated some of what can come up. You can't anticipate everything. So that person is with you and reminding you what you really wanted, so that you can talk with the practitioners and say, okay, no, I really wanted this childbirth. I'm not dilating. It's 48 hours. My contractions are intense. What do we need to do to keep with the fact that I still want natural childbirth? I definitely don't want a C-section. How can we work with this? So you're putting that out, and hopefully the person that's with you is putting that out also. And then also, hopefully, during your time with the clinicians during your pregnancy, you've had some time to talk about the what if scenarios. Now, not everybody's done that, and not everybody's got that person. So when you don't have that person, or you haven't had those conversations with the practitioners, I guess I would really encourage you just to remember voice. Put your hand on your throat and gently, and remember voice, and remember that it's legitimate to bring up what you wanted, to ask questions like, how much time do we have to work with this process? If you give me an epidural, what will that do to the labor? You get to ask those questions. It gets a little complicated. It gets a little impure, because I've known women who really wanted to go natural and it just wasn't working out that way. And talk about surrender, having to give. their dream. I've known people who didn't want an epidural, wound up with an epidural, and it was the epidural that got that dilatation to happen so that a half an hour later, 2 hours later, they were pushing the baby out. Things happen in the delivery process. Babies get hooked up on your hips or something, or the cord is wrapped around the neck, and the baby can't get down enough for pushing. And sometimes C-sections are required. The important thing is having your voice during it. It's nice if you can walk away from a situation and say, I represented myself well. And that's giving voice to you.
Right. And listening to your baby. In the instances that you just cited, a cord or the baby's head is a little crooked or asynclitic and the baby's caught in the pelvis, it's that communication and listening to the baby as well. And establishing those relationships, like you said, with your care provider so that you can have that kind of communication when the labor is happening. Making those decisions together is huge.
I think that's so important. And I really encourage women when they just first start going to their prenatal appointments, start talking about things. And what you're looking for is, are you with a practitioner that can talk with you? And if you're not, get another practitioner. The only time when that gets a little tricky maybe is in rural areas, but really work that conversation. And when you're in your last trimester and you're thinking about labor already, you're getting kind of nervous about it. You don't even know maybe what you need to know. Start talking about it. Do that exploration piece. Bring out what you're hearing from people in your life. And bring out your uncertainty and bring out your wants, what you want to have happen. Just bring it out. Doesn't mean it's going to happen that way in the end necessarily, but bring it out so that the process is open and loving, because that's what will make, no matter what happens, it's going to make it loving. And our baby will be birthed in love instead of angst and anger and huge disappointment or fear. I know women who wound up having a C-section, and afterwards, one of the sad things to me that I can hear is that they're disappointed that there wasn't more talk between their practitioner and them at the time that decision was made. And unless there's a life and death emergency going on, there's time to talk about that. So start that conversation. That's what I'm saying. Start that conversation. Do your love processes during your prenatal phase so that it's there and present, and it's what the practitioners are expecting of you during labor, and they're kind of in on it by the time they're there with you.
Right. I found working with women all these years that if their birth does not go as they had envisioned and planned, if they've had caregivers that listened to their concerns, but took the time to explain things, and they felt, again, like they were part of that decision-making process, yes, they still need to mourn the birth that they didn't have, and that's a process of healing, but they don't experience the same level of trauma, I have found.
Right. And when you talked about listening with your practitioner and having your practitioner listen to you, the thought went through my head. The challenge of all of this is we don't live in a listening culture.
Yes.
And we ourselves haven't been taught how to listen, let alone what it's like to be listened to. Especially when you have people yammering at you, do it this way, do it that way, do it the other way. And you hear everybody's story, which is part of the great fiber of womanhood, is sharing these stories of pregnancy and birthing. But we ourselves have to learn to listen to ourselves and then ask to be listened to. And that's where I get practical. And that's the second part of my book, is just really on, okay, how do we do this? If you're not used to listening, how do you start? And I give 4 levels of listening exercises to get yourself into it. There is no better time to start than when you're pregnant.
Yes, or when you want to conceive a child.
Yeah.
even start then. You're right. That's so profound what you said. Our culture doesn't set that up for us to be listened to be heard, and to even have our voice, because historically, how women have been treated in pregnancy and birth, I think so often we don't even know that we can have a voice. Often you hear, "My doctor let me," "My doctor allowed me." That's not a true level of communication. That's a very authoritative model that strips our autonomy.
Yes, but we're willing to participate in that because we're in the dark. A lot of times people
Mhm.
get pregnant and they maybe weren't planning on it, or you don't understand all it means, obviously, until you're in it.
Right.
So you're vulnerable, you're uncertain, you don't know exactly what you're supposed to do because you have everybody telling you some differing things. So, of course, the doctor said becomes important. What you and I are saying, Michelle, is let's add another ingredient in there. Let's say, yes, what the doctor says is part of it. What you say is an equal and even bigger part of it. What you want to hear, what you got rumbling around inside of yourself is the driving force of it all. So let's bring that to the fore. It takes time. It takes time to listen. And we're in I think globally, maybe it's just a very driven earth. Definitely in our American culture and Western culture, very action oriented. And to listen is amazing because all of a sudden the conversation doesn't happen in 2 minutes. It takes 20 minutes or longer. So it does slow you down. It does slow you down. So it's hard for people who are in high drive mode. It's hard for clinicians because they have 15 minutes and they have to be done with your appointment in our system. So finding the people that can really hear you out. It's why people love doulas, because doulas take that time. It's why people cherish the friend or the family member or the life partner that can take that time to help us hear ourselves. And boy, it's just, we blossom. We just blossom when that can happen. And it starts to shift everything in life. So, again, I can't think of a better time than when you're pregnant to start in on slowing your life down, because it's going to happen when you have children and your life is going to slow down and you're going to be engaged in listening more than perhaps you have been to this point in life.
Yeah, so can you address how this would all carry over to the life with your newborn?
Yeah, everybody, the moment you meet your newborn, you have some kind of an experience, and it's a range. It's not, everybody doesn't do the ooey gooey, oh my God, I'm in love. Everybody doesn't have that experience. I was talking to mom the other day. She said, I looked at the baby and I said, well, that's a baby. But you didn't really feel the connection, the emotional connection to it. And she's still feeling, a couple weeks into it, like, well, this is a baby. When's somebody going to come pick up this baby? So everybody has a different experience. It's great. She was able to say that. She was hearing herself.
And in
And
a safe place. Sorry, I interrupted you, but in a safe environment with you to be able to even voice that.
yes, yeah.
It's
And it's
huge.
the beginning of noticing it. And yet she can really notice her baby. And I think that's where the listening comes in. There's like all of a sudden you're listening not just to yourself, you're also listening to this very concrete little human being. And you don't even understand it a lot of times. That newborn phase, if we call it 0 to 3 months, or even that first year where listening is so nonverbal. And for a lot of us, we're going to find ways to tune in. Technically, it's called attunement to this baby. When we lean into the baby and we're talking to her or him, and smiling and noticing and saying, are you upset? What are you upset about? I don't understand. Or look at you, you seem so happy, you just glow. All that kind of conversing and gentle touching and diaper changing and everything we're doing with that baby is tuning into them and listening. It's the beginning of the challenges of the dance because we're so other focused on that baby. We still need to come back and pay attention and listen to ourselves. How are we really experiencing this? Where are we faking it? Where are we, which is okay. Sometimes we got to fake it till we feel it. Where are we feeling challenged by this? And it's not all this lovey-dovey stuff that everybody's talking about. It's so important to hear that so that we can get our needs met, so that in turn we can turn around and meet these babies' needs.
Yes. Yeah, you have to refill the well.
Yeah, and that's where the dance, the partnership starts. And it's easy in this partnership to get scooped up into the child and everything baby. It's so easy to do that. And it's almost biologically necessary in some ways. So I just ask parents to be very intentional about also paying attention to themselves in this. It's in the partnership of parent and child, it's never just one or the other. It's always both. It's a relationship. So to do the relationship, you have to acknowledge both.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm not saying that's easy. I'm saying it's necessary.
Right. Right. How could the aspects of love with your newborn, could you give just a quick rundown of what that would look like? Maybe if baby's crying and you don't understand why, because if you're not centered and you get stressed, the baby's going to feel it and you kind of feed off of each other. So, and that's stressful. It's stressful. And sometimes, and you don't know what until you have that baby, and each baby is different. It's really unknown territory. We can have tools and techniques, but we have to, I feel like, have those tools to return to center for ourselves, for our children, to help us to be present. And so, can you elaborate a bit on that, please?
Oh, sure. I think all moms and dads who have had that newborn that's crying and you cannot find a way to soothe it have experienced, well, probably a few things, but eventually you experience, taking that deep breath, that deep, what am I going to do? And what you're going to do varies situation to situation, person to person. But I think it starts with taking that deep breath, being real with yourself about how frustrated you are, how self-critical you're being, how maybe you don't like your baby real well at that moment because you're exhausted and you've tried everything and this isn't working and you feel like there's nobody there to help. You're feeling kind of isolated. Then you say to yourself, okay, I have all this going on. I need to tell somebody. So that's a giving voice. And that is important. It is so important to have somebody to tell, somebody to lean on, whether it's your Twitter friend, your Facebook friend, or somebody hopefully immediate in your life. It's so important to be heard. And then putting that baby in a safe place and looking for answers, exploring, okay, what could be happening? Can my clinician help at all? Can the pediatrician help? Can my best friend help? Can grandma help? I need help, and getting it. But getting to a place of, and I think this happens as we start to take that deep breath and saying to ourselves, oh, this isn't working. Hopefully that's happening again in a non-judgy kind of way. And we're not beating up on ourselves because in a true own space, we're not doing that. So does that answer that question?
It does to start. And I do highly recommend your book and your blog to families because it does give you these tools to get centered and focus on that love and that connection and the communication. So these are tools that are going to serve you even before you're pregnant, during your pregnancy, during the birth of your child, as you parent, and even after your children have moved out and they're grown. These are integral tools as parents, and they help us to be more present. Because looking back, even in my journey of parenthood. I have a child that's 33, one that's 26, 20, and 11. So I've been doing this a long time and I'm still doing it. And I have 2 grandchildren. Looking back now, I can see where lack of communication, stress, being in fight or flight, all of that, it keeps you from being present with your child. And we get so consumed in that, we're not able to communicate and parent as effectively as we could. Because I just, like you said, I don't think we're taught these tools. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I'm thinking, makes me think about how much we know now about the body that we didn't know before. And what these tools are doing is literally having an effect on your nervous system. Because when we move into stress about anything, we're amping up certain parts of our nervous system, which affects our brain and how our mind starts working. So we have to be intentional about pulling the calming parts of ourselves in because we make better decisions then. And science is telling us, yes, when we do deep breaths, when we voice our concerns, when we're in acceptance, we calm the uproarious part of our nervous system and bring into play the calming part of our nervous system. It works, it's effective. So now we even have that knowing about our nervous system to back up being intentional about using these processes.
Yes, it's so powerful to get back into that calm and out of fight or flight because we can't access the critical thinking part of our brain. We're in that instinctive part. And I love this quote from your book that you said, fear induces fight, which is arguments, flight, not engaging, or freeze, which is avoidance. And I've really been sitting with that since I read it. It's so powerful. And you say it's simply not conducive to problem solving. Instead, we argue about suggestions from other people. We say we'll talk about it at some other time and never get to that conversation. We avoid activities that relate to the situation, saying we're too busy or too tired. We stop doing our part in the dance of parenting. And I think that's so powerful. Like I said, I've just been sitting with it since I read that and taking it in. Because I think that's part of what you're teaching too, is looking at where our own traumas or our own ways of coping,
Mhm.
being who we are and who we are as a parent.
And that's where parenting is actually a healing experience of traumas and of feeling abandoned or feeling like we were never quite valued. Parenting can be an incredible healing process for that.
Yes, I agree. So I want to very much invite you back to talk about toddlers and teenagers and things like that. So we're going to be continuing this conversation. And thank you again for sharing all of your wisdom. But before we close, if you could share one pearl of wisdom with the Berthies families, what would that be?
One pearl of wisdom.
Or two? Just
I'm going to go with things to practice, things to do. I think when life can be kind of a whirlwind when pregnant, there's getting the baby room ready, there's baby supplies, there's just so many things to consider that we can get kind of crazy with that. So there's a practice that I like to use a lot when there's a lot going on in life. And if you picture a piece of paper and you have 4 columns, the first column is, and this I recommend people do actually before they go to sleep at night. It's a column of what do I feel really good about? What happened that's really good in the day? The second column is what do I not feel so satisfied about? What didn't go so well? The third column, well, it's not really a column, but you take that second column and you circle on it. What of these things that I did not feel satisfied about do I have no control over? So circle those or cross them out. I have no control over there. And then your last column is next steps. So the things I have control over, what might I do next? It's a great way of organizing oneself, balancing our perspective. Because when we get caught up in there's so much to do, and our anger about somebody saying something, I think we get consumed by that and we lose perspective. Doing this exercise, I kind of stumbled on it years ago. It just helped me in busy, busy times have perspective. And when we have more perspective, we're calmer. And like you were saying before, our thinking abilities are more with us. Our intuition is more with us. We can problem solve better. We can live a better day. And that's what it's all about.
Yes.
So my pearl of wisdom is a practice again, something we can do to thrive. Why be doing this lovely thing called loving our children if we're not thriving?
Yes. Yes, you're right. You're right. And I think it's, and too, returning to self and taking your practices that you're talking about too, where eliciting that relaxation response and dumping those good hormones and chemicals and getting out of fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
That's so powerful because it can reset our day or help us sleep better and awaken with different clarity in the morning. So thank you for that. Again, thank you for your wisdom. If our families would like to reach out to you, how can they do that? How can they best reach you?
I think the best way would just be to go to the OMG Parenting website, and you'll see information about how to contact me or anything else you're looking for there. But just OMG Parenting.
Thank you. How did you come up with that name?
Because it works all different ways. It's like, oh my God, parenting. And it's, oh my God, I'm having a baby, that joy piece. Or, oh my gosh, he's just so funny. People, the inflection of it crosses the span of experience of parenting.
I love that. I have this huge smile on my face as you're talking about that. I love that because I knew there was a story behind it. And you're right. There are all these emotions that surround in that. I love that. That's perfect. Thank you again for being here.
It's been great talking with you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. You too. I loved it. And thank you all for being here with us. Remember, you have an inner wisdom that's there for you to tap into, and you know your baby better, your child better than anyone, and trust that.
And you know yourself better than anyone, too.
Yes, yes. So thank you all.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birtheaseservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birthease method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birtheaseservices.com.